I gave my parents $600 a week for a whole year. It wasn't easy for me. I'm not swimming in cash, and every single dollar I sent them cost me something. I wasn't some big shot with disposable income. I worked hard, I sacrificed, and I stretched my own budget just to make sure they didn't have to struggle. But even after all that, they didn't seem to appreciate it. When my dad lost his job, I was there for them. My mom called me, tears in her voice, telling me how they couldn't make ends meet, how the bills were piling up, the mortgage was due, and food was getting scarce. I couldn't bear the thought of them falling apart. So, I stepped in. I did what I thought was right. I was helping my family, supporting them when they needed it the most. At first, it felt good, like I was making a real difference, doing something worthwhile. But slowly, it changed. The more I gave, the more they seemed to expect. $600 wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the way they treated me, the way they talked about my sister as if she was the golden child. Every word out of their mouths, every compliment, every ounce of attention, they reserved it all for her. And I was right there. I never heard them say anything like that about me. And then came the family vacation. I didn't get invited. My dad told me flat out, "We didn't want you there." That stung deeper than anything they'd ever said before. A part of me should have seen it coming. The signs were always there. But this was a whole new level of disrespect. I wasn't just invisible, I was disposable. 24 hours later, my phone exploded with missed calls. I should have known. It's like they waited until it was too late for me to change my mind, too late for me to care. Things were tight this week, and as usual, they'd never come right out and ask. But the guilt trip was always there, hanging in the air like an unspoken demand. Any chance you could send a little extra? It was like they knew exactly how to make me feel like I should give, like it was my duty. I checked my account, and I knew it wasn't smart. My balance was thin. My own bills were piling up, and every dollar I had was stretched to its breaking point. But I did it anyway. I sent the extra because they were my parents. I thought that's what family did, right? You give, you help, even when it hurts. Meanwhile, my sister Laura was living in her little bubble, untouched by the struggle. She married a guy with money, and suddenly she was successful in my parents' eyes. They never once acknowledged the truth, that she hadn't worked a day in her life, that the only reason she had it so easy was because her husband's wealth made it all possible. They talked about her like she was some kind of financial genius. Look at Laura. She's made such smart decisions, Mike. You should learn from her. Smart choices. Smart choices? The only choice she made was finding a man who could bankroll her entire life. But sure, let's all pretend she built her life with her own two hands, like she was some self-made success. I never said anything. What was the point? No matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I sacrificed, she was always the golden child. I could swallow my pride, I thought. As long as she was doing well, maybe it was easier to just keep quiet, to let her shine in their eyes, even if it meant I stayed in the shadows. But the bitterness, God, it built up. I was giving everything I had, and it felt like they barely saw me at all. Just 3 days before all of this, I had invited them over for a cookout. Nothing extravagant, just some steaks, a few drinks, a nice evening, all on me. I wanted to do something nice for them, you know? But when I invited them, they immediately turned me down. My mom said they weren't feeling well. I asked if they needed anything, trying to be helpful, but she just sighed like she was exhausted. "We're just trying to rest. We don't want you to get sick, honey." I hesitated, unsure if I should push further. "Are you sure? I can bring you some food, anything you need." No, don't stop by," she snapped, then softened. "But if you could maybe help us out with some medicine? Things have been a little tight this week." I didn't even think twice. I sent them $200 without hesitation, hoping it would ease their stress, even if it meant tightening my own belt a little more. "Thank you, honey. We'll pay you back as soon as we can." That was 3 days ago. But the next day, everything started to unravel. My neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, called. He's an older guy who's always been kind to me, someone I talk to now and then, mostly small talk. But this time, his words sent a chill down my spine. I just wanted to let you know that I checked on your folks' house and fed their fish while they were gone. I frowned. Gone where? Oh, their trip. They should be back soon. I couldn't even breathe for a second. A trip? How had I not known about this? They'd told me they were too sick to come to the cookout, but they were on a trip? My heart sank. What the hell was going on? They left 6 days ago. 6 days. I couldn't speak for a second. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. Who were they with? Oh, your sister and her husband, Mr. Jenkins said casually. Looked like a nice family outing. I don't even remember how I ended the call. I just sat there, staring blankly at the wall, trying to process it. My parents, the same people who had called me every other week, telling me how hard things were, how they didn't know how they were going to make ends meet, had gone on vacation. With Laura, and they never told me. Not only that, but 3 days ago, when they were already on this trip, they'd lied to my face. They told me they were sick, refused to see me, and asked me for money. I sat there, feeling like the biggest idiot in the world. How had I not seen it? I'd given them everything I had, every single week, and they had been lying to me the whole time. They'd put Laura on a pedestal, praised her for making smart choices, while I was the one slaving away, stretching myself thin, thinking I was doing the right thing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. Every time they'd asked me for help, every time I'd stressed over my own bills, just to make sure they were okay. Every time they'd made me feel like I had to support them while they sat there, treating Laura like some kind of queen. I felt sick, betrayed, and so damn stupid. The next day they came home acting like nothing had changed, but I couldn't let it go. I had to confront them. I was done being the fool. I didn't know what to expect, but I definitely wasn't prepared for what happened next. I didn't go to their house right away. I needed time to cool down. If I had shown up the second I found out, I might have said something I couldn't take back. But after a restless night of tossing and turning, I knew I couldn't let it go. I had to confront them. So, the next night, I drove over. After a few seconds, my mom answered, and her face lit up like nothing was wrong, like everything was fine. Oh, Mike, what a nice surprise. We were just sitting down to dinner. I stepped inside, and the house was spotless, like they'd done a deep clean before they left. Fresh flowers sat on the table, their bright colors almost mocking me. A half-empty suitcase sat by the stairs, abandoned and forgotten, as if this was all just part of some perfect family vacation. It was like stepping into a picture-perfect scene that didn't belong to me. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. So, how was the trip? The moment the words left my mouth, I saw it. The flicker of guilt in her eyes, quickly masked by the smile she forced. What trip? She said, her voice just a little too sweet. I let out a short, bitter laugh, the reality of it all crashing down. What trip? My mind was spinning. The lies, the manipulation, the disrespect. I couldn't believe it. I had been played, and she thought I wouldn't notice. I let out a bitter laugh. The one you took with Laura and her husband. The one you lied about. Her expression changed instantly. Her eyes flicked toward the kitchen, almost as if she were hoping my father would come to her rescue. But he didn't. I could hear him shuffling around, pretending not to hear, moving dishes like it was just another night. I stood there, letting the silence stretch. I wanted to give her a chance to explain, to come clean, to say something that might make sense, but instead, she crossed her arms, acting like I was the one in the wrong. I don't understand why you're upset, she said, her voice cold, almost dismissive. We don't have to tell you everything we do. I stared at her, feeling my chest tighten with anger. Are you serious? I've been sending you money every week, I said, my voice shaking with frustration. I paid for that trip without even knowing it. And 3 days ago, you told me you were sick. You asked me for money for medicine, while you were probably sitting on a beach. Finally, my father decided to step in. He emerged from the kitchen, arms crossed, a scowl on his face. Watch your tone. I let out a sharp breath, my whole body tense with rage. You know what? Number, I'm not going to watch my tone. I took a step closer, my voice rising. I bend over backwards to help you. I give you everything I have, and you both lied to me. You used me. My mom sighed dramatically, like I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. We were just trying to get away, she said, with that same tired excuse, as if it was all justified somehow. We didn't mean to hurt you. But all I could feel was the weight of the betrayal, pressing down harder than I could bear. We were just trying to have a nice trip, Mike. Why do you have to make everything about money? That was it. That was the moment I broke. My chest tightened, and I could feel the rage building hot and bitter, like it was going to consume me. I hope you enjoyed it, I said, my voice cold. Because I'm done. I pulled out my phone, opened the banking app, and without a second thought, I canceled the automatic transfers right in front of them. My mom's face went pale, and for the first time, my dad's jaw tightened. They were both silent, their shock hanging in the air. And then I saw it. Worry. Real worry creeping into their eyes. They'd never looked at me like that before. Mike, don't be like this, my mom said, her voice shaky. You know things are hard for us. I laughed, but it was empty. Bitter. Yeah, they weren't hard enough to keep you from going on vacation. I turned to leave, the weight of everything heavy in my chest. But then my dad said something that stopped me dead in my tracks. You're just jealous we didn't invite you. I turned around, my blood running cold. Excuse me? He shrugged like it was no big deal, like he hadn't just stabbed me in the heart. Completely unfair, Ed. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're throwing a tantrum because we didn't invite you. My hands trembled, not with sadness, not with the overwhelming anger that had been building up, but with a deep, aching frustration. That's the difference between me and Laura, I said, my voice low, shaking with emotion. She wouldn't have given you a dime, and you still treat her like she walks on water. The words hung in the air, heavy and raw, and I felt a tear burn in the corner of my eye, but I refused to let it fall. I spent a year making sure you were okay, and you don't even respect me enough to be honest. I didn't give her a chance to respond. I turned on my heel, walked straight out the door, and didn't look back. My heart was pounding in my chest, a mix of fury and hurt. I got in my car and drove away, feeling like every mile was just putting more space between me and the betrayal. When I got home, my phone was blowing up. Missed calls from my mom, my dad, even Laura. But I ignored every single one of them. I couldn't deal with them. Not now. Not after everything. When I walked inside, Anna was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. She took one look at me and knew something had snapped. I sank down beside her, letting out a sharp exhale like all the air had been sucked out of me. And then I said it out loud, even though I'd been avoiding it for so long. I'm done giving them money. Anna didn't say anything at first. She just nodded, her eyes understanding, as if she'd been waiting for me to finally say it. And honestly, I think I had been waiting too. For months, I had felt trapped by some invisible obligation, like I had to be the one to take care of them. If I didn't, who would? But the thing was, I already knew the answer. Laura could have done it. She and her husband had more money than they knew what to do with. They could afford endless vacations, luxury, everything. But somehow, I was the one stretching my paycheck every single week to make sure our parents were comfortable, to make sure they weren't struggling. And for what? To be treated like this? Like I was invisible? A backup plan? The rage built up inside me again, but this time it wasn't just anger. It was the sharp sting of betrayal, the cold weight of realizing just how much I'd been taken for granted. Like a backup plan, while she got the golden treatment. Not anymore. Anna leaned back on the couch, crossing her arms. So, what now? You think they'll just take the loss? I ran a hand over my face, trying to push down the knot of frustration in my chest. They'll try to blame me. Maybe send Laura to talk some sense into me, but I don't care. I'm done. And I thought I meant it, or at least I wanted to. But the next morning, my phone was ringing off the hook. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages. The bombardment was relentless. I ignored every single one of them, but deep down I felt a flicker of doubt. Could I really go through with this? Then around noon, a loud knock echoed through the apartment. Anna shot me a look. Tell me you didn't invite her. I shook my head and stood up. But before I could even make it to the door, I heard her voice. Mike, I know you're home. Open the door. I swung it open, and there she was, Laura, standing in front of me like she was just out for a casual stroll. Designer outfit, sunglasses perched on her head like she had just come from brunch, all confidence and ease. And right behind her, our parents. I stepped forward just enough to block the doorway, keeping them from coming in. What do you want? Laura scoffed, rolling her eyes like I was the one being ridiculous. Are you seriously holding Mom and Dad hostage, Mike? This is so beneath you. I felt a surge of anger flood my veins, but I pushed it down. Beneath me? She had no idea what it felt like to be on the other side, constantly giving, constantly bending over backward, while she waltzed through life without a care. And now, she was standing there with them, as if they had every right to barge in, as if I owed them something. But not anymore. I was done. Vacation? I let out a dry, humorless laugh. No, I'm cutting them off because they've been lying to me for months, using me like a damn ATM while treating you like royalty. But you already knew that, didn't you? She rolled her eyes like she couldn't be bothered. Oh, please. You act like they forced you to send money. I clenched my jaw, the anger building again. They didn't force me, Laura, but they sure as hell manipulated me. The fake sob stories, the guilt trips. We don't know how we're going to make it, all the while they were pocketing it for vacations with you. My mom finally spoke up, her voice defensive, like she hadn't just been caught red-handed. That's not fair, Mike. I raised an eyebrow, my voice cutting through the tension. Struggling so much that you needed extra money for medicine while sipping cocktails on the beach. That shut her up instantly. But Laura, of course, sighed dramatically, like she was the one who'd been wronged. Look, it's no big deal. Just turn the payments back on, and let's all put this behind us. I almost laughed in her face. You think I'm just going to roll over and keep paying? Number you pay for them. My dad, who had been silent up until this point, finally stepped forward, his voice cold and distant. We don't want your money. The words hit me like a slap. I could feel the hurt flood in, but there was no turning back. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect, or the lack of it. I crossed my arms, trying to steady my breathing. Good, because you're not getting it. Laura let out a bitter laugh, the sound sharp and ugly. Wow, so you're just going to abandon them now? Anna, who had been sitting quietly on the couch, stood up and walked over. Her voice was steady, but there was a fire in her eyes. Abandon them? You mean like they left him, lied to him, used him? Laura turned to Anna as if she'd just noticed her presence. Oh, great, your opinion, she sneered. That's when it happened, so fast that neither of us had time to react. 1 second, Laura was standing there, her smug expression barely hiding her entitlement. The next, Anna had grabbed a handful of her perfectly styled hair, yanking it back with a swift motion. Listen to me very carefully, Anna said, her voice eerily calm, almost too calm. "You and your parents are never coming back here. Mike is done with you, and so am I. Now turn around, get in your overpriced car, and drive away." Laura yelped, trying to pry Anna's hand off her hair, but Anna didn't let go until she had to. Laura stumbled back, her eyes wild with fury. "You're crazy!" she shrieked, but Anna just grinned, her lips curling into a sharp smile. "Try me." For the first time, I saw it. Fear. Actual fear in Laura's eyes. She turned back to our parents, expecting them to back her up, to make this all go away. But they just stood there, silent, like they finally realized they'd lost. Laura huffed, straightened her outfit like she was trying to hold on to whatever dignity she had left, and gave me one last glare. "You'll regret this," she hissed, but I just smiled. Not a chance. And with that, she stormed off, our parents trailing behind her like lost puppies, too stunned to say anything. As soon as the door slammed behind them, I turned to Anna. She shrugged, unbothered. What? She deserved it. I laughed for the first time in days, the sound escaping me like a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Remind me never to piss you off. That was the last time I sent my parents a dime. If Laura was so perfect, she could take care of them. The next morning, my phone rang, and I knew exactly who it was before I even looked at it. I thought about ignoring it, but something inside me wanted to hear what they had to say. Maybe I was just curious. I picked it up. "Mike," my mom's voice came through immediately, panic and outrage mixed into one. "I can't believe what happened yesterday. That girlfriend of yours put her hands on your sister. Who does she think she is?" I leaned back in my chair, a bitter chuckle escaping my lips. "You mean when Laura showed up at my door, insulted me, and Anna told her to leave?" Before she could respond, my dad cut in, his voice gruff. "She pulled Laura's hair. That's assault. You need to control your girlfriend, Mike." I could feel the anger rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. "No, Dad. What you need to do is realize that I'm done. I'm done supporting you while you treat me like crap, and I'm done letting you make me feel guilty." The silence on the other end was thick, suffocating. I could tell they didn't know how to respond. The guilt trips, the manipulation, the lies, it all hit them at once, and for the first time I didn't care. I scoffed, feeling a rush of frustration flood through me. "You need to control your daughter," I shot back. Anna was just returning the energy that Laura brought to my doorstep. "Mike, we raised you better than this," my mom whined, her voice dripping with disappointment. I rolled my eyes, the anger rising up in my chest. "Yeah, well, you also raised me to be your personal bank account, so forgive me if I'm done taking life lessons from you." "You're being disrespectful," she snapped, her voice sharp with hurt. "We're your parents." I let out a deep, exasperated sigh. "Already over it, Mom. I'm an adult who didn't invite you to my house yesterday. You showed up unannounced, got put in your place, and now you're mad about it." My words hung heavy in the air, sharp and final. "You need to put that woman in her place, Mike," my dad interjected, his tone cold and commanding. That was it, my breaking point. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound rough in my throat. "No, what I need to do is hang up." "Michael, don't you dare!" My mom's voice echoed in my ear, desperate. Click. The phone slammed down on the table, and I rubbed my temples, trying to hold on to the calm I was struggling to maintain. Anna appeared in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee in her hand, her eyes assessing me. "That bad, huh?" I gave her a tired, bitter grin. "Apparently I'm supposed to control you." She snorted, her voice a mix of amusement and disbelief. "You can't even control your own daughter. Good luck with that." I thought that was the end of it, thought it was over, but I was wrong. 3 hours later, there was a loud, aggressive knock on the door. My heart sank, and I already knew who it was. The rage that had settled in my chest flared again, and I braced myself. It was far from over. Irritation flashed through me as another loud, aggressive knock shook the door. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Laura, her arms folded, her face twisted in fury, but she wasn't alone. Her husband, Dan, loomed behind her, his expression not angry but menacing. My anxiety spiked as I barely had time to say, "What the hell do you want?" before Dan brushed past me and marched into my apartment. His voice was low and menacing. "You think this is funny?" He jabbed a finger in Anna's direction, his eyes blazing with accusation. "Letting your little girlfriend put her hands on my wife?" Anna stood up, unimpressed, her eyes flashing with defiance. "Your wife ran her mouth in our house." Dan took a step toward her, his face darkening with rage. Maybe she needs to learn a little respect. Fear and adrenaline surged through me. Before I realized what I was doing, my fist flew, connecting with Dan's jaw. He stumbled back, shock etched on his face. But I wasn't done. All the frustration, all the anger that had built up over the past year came flooding out. I punched him again and again, my fists flying as I unleashed all my pent-up emotions. Finally, I stepped back, my chest heaving, my hands shaking. Dan lay on the floor, moaning, his face a mess of bruises and swelling. Laura screamed, her voice shrill with horror. I stood there, frozen, my mind reeling with the consequences of my actions. What had I just done? I glared at Laura, my hand throbbing from the punches I'd thrown. "You came here looking for a fight. You found one." Dan coughed, wiping blood from his lip, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and shock. "You didn't have to try so hard, man." I leaned down, my voice low and menacing. "You threatened my girlfriend in my own house. If you ever set foot in here again, it'll be worse." Laura's face twisted with rage as she helped Dan up. "You just started a war, Mike." I grinned, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. "No, you did." Dan, still dazed, mumbled, "I'm sorry, man. I shouldn't have." I cut him off, my voice firm. "Too late. Get out." They left, without another word, the tension between us palpable. Anna walked over, her eyes fixed on my bruised knuckles, and then at the door. "Well," she said, sipping her coffee. "This has escalated." I shook my head, laughing. No kidding. For the first time in my life, I felt free. No more guilt, no more obligations, no more playing the role of the lesser child who had to prove his worth with money. I was done. After Laura and Dan left, I didn't hear from either of them. No calls, no texts, just silence. And I was okay with that. Anna and I carried on as if nothing had happened. But 3 days later, my neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, stopped me as I was walking to my car. "Boy, you sure made a mess of things," he said, shaking his head. I frowned, curiosity getting the better of me. "What do you mean?" Mr. Jenkins grinned mischievously. "Your parents and your sister had a little, let's call it a disagreement. And when I say little, I mean the whole damn street could hear it." My eyes widened, surprise and concern washing over me. "What happened?" Mr. Jenkins leaned in, a conspiratorial look on his face. "I was outside watering my plants when it started. Your sister drove up, slammed the car door so hard I thought the windows would shatter, and started screaming before she even made it to the porch." I raised an eyebrow, my mind racing with possibilities. "What were they arguing about?" Mr. Jenkins' eyes sparkled with excitement. "Well, I didn't want to pry, but they were yelling so loud I could hear every word. So of course I went over and stood under their window." I laughed, despite myself. "Of course you did." Mr. Jenkins grinned. "Your sister was furious with them. Something about how they should have treated you better and how if they hadn't been so greedy." My eyes narrowed, anger and resentment simmering just below the surface. It seemed like my family's drama was far from over. I listened, my eyes widening in shock as Mr. Jenkins continued to spill the tea. "You wouldn't have snapped," he said, chuckling. But she kept yelling that it was their fault that you cut them off and now she had to deal with them. I blinked, my mind racing. Dealing with them? I repeated, my curiosity piqued. Mr. Jenkins grinned mischievously. Yep, that's the best part. Your parents told her she had to start helping them now that you wouldn't give them a dime. It was her turn to step up. I burst out laughing, the absurdity of it all hitting me. Oh, it gets better, Mr. Jenkins said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. I wiped a tear from my eye, eager to hear more. She lost it, Mr. Jenkins continued. Started screaming about how she wasn't their bank and how they should have saved money instead of blowing it on vacations. Called her a leech. I chuckled, feeling a sense of satisfaction. And my favorite part, Mr. Jenkins said, grinning. She actually said, "Why don't you call Mike and apologize so he'll turn the payments back on?" I laughed again, shaking my head. And what did she say? I asked, my curiosity getting the better of me. Your dad said, "We don't want his money anymore," Mr. Jenkins replied, chuckling. And your mom. Oh, your mom. She started crying about how you let her down, and that family is supposed to help each other. I rolled my eyes, feeling a sense of detachment. But your sister didn't buy it, Mr. Jenkins said, a hint of admiration in his voice. She told them, and I quote, "You don't care about family. You care about who you can squeeze money out of." I whistled, impressed. Then she stormed out, Mr. Jenkins concluded, chuckling. I shook my head, feeling a sense of wonder. So they lost both of us in 1 week, I said, grinning. Mr. Jenkins nodded, a sly smile spreading across his face. Looks like it. And now you're alone. No golden child, no reliable paycheck, just the two of them sitting in that house with no one left to feel guilty about helping them. I let out a slow breath, feeling a sense of liberation wash over me. For years, they had played favorites, taken me for granted, used me, dismissed me. And in the end, all it took was one moment of clarity for it all to fall apart. I looked at Mr. Jenkins and smiled, feeling a sense of closure. Well, I guess you finally got what you wanted. He raised an eyebrow, curious. How's that? I turned to my car and opened the door. They wanted Laura to be their golden child. Now they can keep her. With that, I drove off, feeling a sense of freedom and peace that I had never known before. But little did I know, it wasn't the end of it. About a week later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Mike, it's Dad. Call me." My heart sank, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. What did he want now? I stared at the text, my mind racing with a mix of emotions. Back. It's important. The words seemed to scream at me, demanding my attention. I debated whether to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. I took a deep breath and called him back. He picked up immediately, his voice laced with a sense of urgency. "Mike, listen, I don't want to fight, but we need to talk." I felt a surge of annoyance, my defenses rising. "If this is about money, Dad..." But he cut me off, his tone firm. "It's not about money. It's about your sister." My curiosity was piqued, and I felt a pang of concern. "What about her?" He hesitated, and for a moment I wondered what was coming. "She's getting a divorce." I almost dropped my phone, shock and surprise washing over me. "Wait, what? Dan kicked her out?" My dad's voice was laced with resignation. "He said he was done supporting her and now she's back here with us. She has nowhere else to go." I bit back a laugh, a sense of irony and satisfaction washing over me. "You mean the woman who told me to just turn the payments back on is now broke and back in your house?" My dad sighed heavily, his tone disapproving. "Mike, please, this isn't funny." I leaned back on the couch, a grin spreading across my face. "It kind of is." There was a long silence, and for a moment, I wondered if my dad was going to hang up on me. But finally he spoke up. "She wants to talk to you." I felt a surge of indifference, my emotions numb. not my problem. And with that, I hung up, feeling a sense of closure and vindication. I guess Laura finally learned what it's like to be on the other side.